Good afternoon, everybody. We're delighted that you're here with us. Sorry for the couple of minutes delay. This is Lynn Rubenstein with the Northeast Recycling Council. We've been having some audio problems, which is what delayed us, and I'm certainly hoping they don't resuscitate themselves. So having said that, thank you for all being here for this webinar about on-the-ground lessons learned from municipalities. So Namoa, could you please mute yourself? I can see you there. Mute Namoa. There you go. So on the ground, lessons learned from municipalities to reduce contamination of residential recycling. This is being jointly hosted by the Northeast Recycling Council and the Northeast Waste Management officials. As I said, I'm Lynn Rubenstein. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Recycling Council, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on both the NERC and NMOA websites when we are done. You are all on mute, but we definitely want you to be asking questions. So if you're familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, you know there's a little dashboard on the upper right of your screen. It's got a little question box area that you can go to, and that's where you type in your questions, and I'll be monitoring them. We are anticipating that we're going to be asking questions at the end, unless there's some clarifying questions that need to happen in the meantime. But please, I will be reminding you to ask questions as we go along. We'll have the opportunity to address them. We have three outstanding speakers this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce them and do the bios before we get going with each of them. But first presenter is going to be Janice Perret from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Janice is a municipal recycling analyst in the Municipal Waste Reduction Branch. She has been managing the Recycling IQ Kit program since it started as a pilot program in 2016 and has worked with all 10 participating communities. She gained her solid waste management experience working at the municipal level in a variety of roles, including as a recycling coordinator. Prior to her current position, she served in the Waste Ban Enforcement Program at Mass DEP. And we'll hear from Janice in just a moment. After Janice speaks, we'll be hearing from Marissa Perez-Dormitzer. She has served as the District Recycling Coordinator for the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District for 18 years. She works with the district's two member communities, New Bedford and Dartmouth, to educate residents about waste reduction, implement new programs, and apply for and manage grants. In 2014, the education component of, in 2014, New Bedford implemented an automated trash and single-stream recycling program. She led the outreach and education component of the new program. As a result of moving to the new system, 30% less trash has now been produced and recycling has doubled. She has served as the project manager for the IQ Kit grant in both communities and insisting the communities began in 2018. She graduated from Rutgers University with a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering. And last but certainly not least, we're going to be hearing from Julia Green. She's the recycling coordinator for Lynn. She started at the end of 2014 when Lynn moved to an automated trash and recycling cart system. The introduction of the system drove solid waste down by 25% and increased the recycling rate from 7% to 21%. A new problem arose with the automated system, contamination, and it became the problem to solve. Julia spent her first 2 years focused on running various social marketing campaigns to increase recycling and improve the quality with little improvement. So before the presentations begin, I'd like to remind you that everyone is on mute, but please do ask questions and use the GoToWebinar dashboard, the question area, to post those questions. And so we'll say thank you very much. And Janice, can you try speaking? Because it looks to me like you're muted. Let's try to unmute. There she goes. Janice, can you speak now?
Unmuted.
Oh,
yes.
There she goes. Great. Thank you, Janice.
Thanks, Lynn. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a short agenda for what I wanted to talk about. Marissa and Julia actually implemented this program, so they're going to get into the details of what they did. I'm just going to show you sort of why we started this project in the first place and the bird's eye view of what is included in the Recycling IQ Kit. So we like to say that this is more than just an education and outreach campaign, because what we're trying to do is actual behavior change. In 2015, it was brought to our attention that contamination in the residential recycling stream was becoming a real problem. Some communities were getting letters from their MRFs saying, you know, you got to clean up the recycling. What are we going to do about this? So Mass DP, Brooke Nash, my boss, got in touch with the Recycling Partnership, and they actually applied for a grant, and through that grant, we worked together to create the Recycling IQ Kit, which is what we're going to talk about now. So what we're finding, what we think, is that to get real behavior change, you need to go beyond just education. We get inundated with images and words all the time, and we're not really processing all of that stuff all the time. So we feel like we need to have some direct feedback with people, like face-to-face, or leave a message for them at the curb to get beyond just the education part and really penetrate into people's very busy lives. So what we also know is that enforcement without education is frustrating. So we don't want to just, you know, leave a tag on their bin and say, we're not taking this, or this is trash, because that's not going to make people like us. We want actually people to recycle and continue to recycle. So we need to make sure that what we're saying is polite and encouraging and clear. So this is my favorite slide. It's just a case in point of something that's not helpful to people. When you see this on your bin, it might close you off to the message. Even though the message is important, it's not engaging. So we want to move away from that, and that's what the Recycling Partnership helped us do. So we were coupling our awareness message with very helpful feedback, pretty impunitive stuff, and we had three main goals. One was improve material quality, increase participation, and don't lose participation. We don't want to make people so upset that they're not actually recycling anymore. And then one common voice for recycling in Massachusetts. We have 351 towns and cities. We want this message to be clear and understandable throughout the state. Every recycling coordinator has their own kind of messaging, but if we all use one message and clear icons and things, then no matter where we go, we'll know what's expected of us. So we piloted it, the materials that we came up with, and so far we've done it in 10 communities. So the first was in 2016. We did 4 communities, and then last year we did 6 communities. They really did it. They got grants from Mass DP, and they took the ball and they ran with it, and they did a great job. So really quickly, I'll just give you an overview of the Curbside program and the drop-off program and sort of what's in the Recycling IQ Kit. So this is one of the workers in Lowell. She's lifting the lid. She's got her little clipboard there with her data that she's collecting. She's got a bag that's got her oops tags and thank you tags in it. And this is the reference guide for the IQ Kit. So this is the standard operating procedures, if you will, that woman was following. She is what they first did was they sent out an annual information card. That information card had all of the things that we want to see in the recycling cart and all the things, like large sort of things that we wouldn't want to see. The top 5 things the MRF said we don't want to see in the recycling cart, that was in the annual info card. Then she has oops tags, and she's going to go to the same houses over 8-week period, and it would be 16 weeks if they did recycling every other week. She's going to the same homes and on the 2 worst routes. We were targeting the 2 worst routes because we want to see if we can make a change there. She's tagging them, the carts, if they have an issue, a bag of diapers, an engine block, a bowling ball, yard waste, things like that, and also plastic bags, food. She's marking on the card. She turns the cart 90 degrees so that the hauler knows I'm not picking up that cart. And then in Lowell, and not in every community, but some communities use thank you cards. So if there was an improvement to the bin, then the next week they'd put a thank you card on it, say thanks for improving, or thanks for doing the right thing. Top issue mailer. So this was like the one thing that we really want to see out of the carts. When we did our waste audit, we found that 40% of the contamination was recyclables in bags, trash in bags, what we cumulatively call stuff in bags, and then just like loose plastic bags and film. So the MRF said bags are our number one problem. They are, making us have to run less effectively, less efficiently. So we're going to target that thing. So we sent mailers out with that message 2 weeks into the program. And then we encouraged all the communities to get that message out in any other way possible, whether it was social media or billboards or street signs or A-frames. Just get that message out there for just the period of time that you're doing this program so that you're really penetrating. They're seeing it wherever they go, and then you take it away so that that message doesn't get diluted over time. So this is one of the pages in the Recycling IQ Kit, and it has all of the steps and all of the resources that you would need if you wanted to implement the program. Oops, why is my thing not going? Okay, here we go. So these are some of the core tools. I'll show you a couple of them in bigger pictures, but the postcard, the personalized feedback is the oops tag and the thank you tag, and then this issue specific. This is just what the annual mailer looked like. We tend to use this for a lot of different things. You could put it on a banner, send it in as a flyer in the electric bill or whatever. This is like our stock message. And then this is our stock targeted issue message. This is the last page of the Recycling IQ Kit. All of those things, artwork, assessment tool, those are links to those resources that are available to anyone in the world who wants to use them. They're available. We have a lot of artwork that the Recycling Partnership put together. The MRF survey, that's something that you would work with your MRF to find out what are the things that we want to keep out of the cart and what are the things we want to message that we want. So it's just chock full of great resources. We encourage anybody to look at it. I'll just give you the link to how to find it at the end of my talk. So this is the drop-off. This is what the drop-off looked like. In the right, you'll see over here, maybe you can see my cursor. That was a temporary worker that we hired to pass out the annual info card. It was her entree into saying, hey, I'm here for a legitimate reason. I'm telling you, please don't put that blender in the single stream. They did, this is the Needham transfer station. They did these great don't bag recyclable signs with the A-frames. They were only out for the time that the workers were there. I mean, they were out throughout the week, but only during the 8 to 12 week period that they were out there giving the message. This is the reference guide for the drop-off. It's much more simplified for a drop-off community. We have the same core tools. We have the annual info card mailer, but we also do site signage because we think that site signage is really important. Make sure that those signs are clear, concise, and uniform across the state. It really is helpful to know wherever you go that they're looking for the same things. So again, this is the woman, I can't think of her name right now, Tammy, and she was telling this guy, hey, I'm here, I'm trying to educate people about how to recycle better. Yeah, use this to know. This is just a clearer picture of the types of resources that were provided through the IQ Kit. The paper sign Recycling Partnership created that icon, the trash one too. So those were permanent signs that they put at the bins, and then the temporary signs for the bags, the targeted message. This is from 2017. This is the Groton transfer station, and photo credit goes to Tom Delaney. They actually went a little bit further, and they color-coded and painted in front of their, wherever they were taking the material, so that people were it was even more clear where you were supposed to take stuff. I thought that was really great. So I wanted to show those pictures. That's the sort of hazardous waste stuff is in red. Their targeted message was don't trash recyclables. Keep the recyclables out of the trash. They don't have so much of a contamination problem there, but they were definitely seeing a lot of good recyclable stuff in the trash. This is just their 12 or 13 bunkers that they had for all their different sorts of things. So that was really neat. And again, at the back of the drop-off Recycling IQ Kit, there's this great resource with all of the links to all of the resources that you might want to implement the program. So this is again the sign. I just wanted to let you know the results of the last couple of years. This is just to refresh your memory on where we where we implemented, not so much in Western Mass yet, but we are going to do one this year. But we did a great variety of suburban and urban, very dense, not so dense communities, and 2 drop-offs. In the 2016 pilot program, we saw great results. Number of contaminated carts all went down. Overall contamination went down because we actually did waste audits at the beginning and end, which in 2017 we couldn't do because those are pretty cost prohibitive. But we were able to do that for the pilots, and we saw a 30%, I believe, reduction in overall contamination. Don't quote me on that. Actually, I might be wrong. I'll have to look it up. So summary of tagging rate improvements 2017. These were the curbside communities that we worked with, and as you can see, they all saw a decrease in tagging over the course of time. So they all tagged for 8 weeks. Some of them were 16 weeks because they were every other week, and they were, it wasn't an 8-week program, it was a 16-week program, but they still saw this incredible decrease in the amount of tagging, which just goes to show that their hard work was paying off. And this is my favorite picture of a contaminated recycling cart. And when I talked to the resident, he was like, but they take it all the time. But we can't take it all the time anymore, so that's sort of the point. I'm done.
Great. Thank you, Janice. So early warning, you've got lots of questions. So thank you so much. So now we're going to turn to Marissa, and she'll be speaking about some of the, how it actually played out on the ground. So Marissa, why don't you try speaking to us? So I'm not hearing you, Marissa, if you are talking. Let's just see. It looks like we should be able to hear her. So Marissa, I'm not hearing you. And are you speaking? So Marissa, we are not hearing you. Yes, I'm speaking. Well, we're not hearing you. So I'm wondering if it would make sense. Julia, could you possibly go next? And we'll give Marissa a chance to call back in. Julia, are you able to speak? Let's just see. So we're waiting for, let's see if Julia can talk to us. Well, you know what, Marissa, I'm going to suggest that you call back.
Can you hear me? This is Julia.
Yes. Is this? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, Julia, I can hear you.
Lynn, I think I was gonna go first anyway. So at least that
was
what we
good.
had. Yeah. Okay.
So then, Julia, I'm going to make you the presenter, and Marissa, I'm going to ask you to call back in. And so, Julia, you're the presenter now. And there we go. Thank you. Now we know what the problem was. Wait.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
All right, great. All right. Wow. Okay, so my name is Julia Green. Lynn did an introduction before, so I'm just going to get right into it. Lynn is north of Boston on the North Shore, and the important thing to tell you about it is that we're 13 square miles for a city of 91,000 people. So we're big as well as not so dense. We're a very diverse community, and so I give the breakout right there. It's funny, I can't see mine. Oh gosh, okay, there it goes. All right, so we're a very diverse community. Lynn is a young community, and Lynn is a city of immigrants. I have the statewide numbers next to these numbers, and Lynn is a city of renters, so that's really important for us. 55% of residents rent, as opposed to 38% in the state. My next slide. Why the Recycling IQ? Here's my picture. So we have a lot of recyclables in the trash, overflowing, trash on the ground. And then in our recycling, you can see a lot of contamination in that recycling cart, kind of like the one that Janice showed us. The next one is where to start. So we actually service 27,000 households in our automated curbside recycling program. And there are 20 separate routes. So we have every other week recycling pickup. And so we picked the most contaminated areas, and we decided on those based on two ways. One is Waste Management telling us where they thought the greatest contamination is, and then also where we had ticketed fined households. So we did about 500 households a day, all 10 days. And we also wanted to pick very visible points in those areas. Basically, we wanted everyone in the city to be aware of the program and maybe think we're coming to their cart as well, even though we were only covering 5,000 carts. And that's about 20% of who we service. So next. So this is just a map of the areas that we mapped out and picked from last year. So, and here's our budget. What we spent was $40,000. So we got a $15,000 grant last year from Mass DEP, and then we used our RDP, which is recycling dividends points that we had earned for the rest of our costs. And what did we spend it on? Well, before I tell you that, the data and technology we used was really low tech. So the data we got from our trash and recycling carts master database, which shows all of the households that have carts and their serial numbers, etc. We use the city assessor's property owner database, and we use waste management audits. So the technology we used is spreadsheets on Excel and then in Google. So Google Docs on Google Drive was really key. We use Google Maps. We use cell phones for email, text, and pics. And then we use Facebook for communicating. We use paper lists, and we use clipboard. So the next is the Lynn Recycling IQ program was 18 weeks, actually. 2 weeks we spent practicing, because this is we were one of the first communities, and we really wanted to figure that out. So, and we were also waiting for some of our materials to arrive. So it all worked out. I really suggest doing those practice runs, and you can then also get a baseline. You get a baseline of where the contamination is. So messaging, we used a myriad of media. So here's the list. So annual info card, which Janice showed, a top issue card, billboards, banners, store signs, sandwich boards, Facebook posts, newspaper ads, and newspaper articles, and community television segments. And I'm going to just briefly go through those. So here's the annual info card that you already saw with Janice. We, our number one immigrant community speaks Spanish, so everything was in English and Spanish. No bags mailer. This went to the 5,000 households that we were checking their carts, and it was a no bags card that we sent out, direct mail. The next was billboards. We had 4 billboards that went up every 3 or 4 weeks through the whole time of the program in 4 key locations in the city of Lynn. So then we had these great banners, and I love these because they were cheap, and then we could put them on all the city fences. So here's a picture in front of a school and also a city park. So we put these close to the areas that we were working. And then we had these store signs, and getting them put up at the corner stores throughout the city. And we did one that was first strongest in English, or primarily in English, and the second one was primarily in Spanish, though they were both bilingual. The next thing is our Facebook posts, which I love Facebook to reach people in Lynn. So as you can see, I just want to point out on this one Facebook with the do not bag recyclables. If you look down towards the bottom of that post, you'll see that 15,000 people were reached with that post. And actually the lighter part of that bar is organically or not paying, and the darker bar is what was paid. So we always ask people to share and then they get our information. The other thing is that with these posts, just to look at, is that the more scenes you can have that people go, oh, that's Lynn, or that's your town, people will click on it and look at it. So we try to take a lot of pictures when we're out in the field. So the next one was newspaper coverage. So we had an article in the Lynn item, which you can see in front of you, which I think was practically my press release. And then there was a great MSO News Sports is kind of a radio written platform, and they did a great interview and took some videos and posted those up there. And then this is another picture of the Lynn item, but we also had it in the Spanish language newspaper La Voz. Then we were on Lynn Community Television, basically with our own program. And so here I am sitting with our supervisor from last year, Alicia Rabicepalo, and in front of us are the wrappers from Poland Springs, which people seem to not understand are like plastic bags. So that was one of the things we wanted to get across in that episode. The next is our staff. So here was basically our uniform, and we found out early that we really needed to wear these vests because we were out in the early morning and school was still in session and people were just not seeing us. And then the other thing that we adopted for our uniform is cargo pants. So we have our cargo pants on because the oops tags fit perfectly into those cargo pants. The next is the oops tag. So this is the tag that gets hung on the cart. And the next is a thank you tag that we had paid for, but we didn't use. We ran out of oops tags early, and so we ended up just stapling the oops message onto the recycling tag. The next is oops worthy carts. So here's basically what we wrote down. B was for bagged recyclables. Y was for yuck, food or liquids. C was for clothing. T was for tanglers. O was for other objects. It could be anything, wood, large plastic furniture, anything really. And then styrofoam, even though it wasn't a particular one that I guess, that Mass DEP was looking for, we were checking that too. And then the U is unidentified apartment or unit number. So the next is, here's the oops worthy cart and pictures, and you see there's an oops tag hanging off of one cart of this card, and then you can see two oops tags in the cart. So even though we were rejecting this card constantly, this particular household was pretty resistant to our messages. But there is some pictures of the problems we faced. So we had two ways of collecting data, or two things we were looking for. One was the set-out rate, and the set-out rate is all of the carts set out on one particular street and for a particular area too. So what this sheet shows, and this is a completed one, is that on Tuesday Blue, these are the streets we hit. And then we have the total number of households on those streets, and then what the actual set out, how many carts were, recycling carts were set out. And the next is showing how we tracked that. This is a messy sheet, but that's how we used it. And then we we input that data into the database, the online database or Excel sheets. The next is our walk list. So our walk list was a list of all these street addresses in actual units too, so that when we filled out the sheet, the next one shows a sheet filled out, is we would write, like say on this one you see Unit 1, 319 Boston Street. Already the week before they had bags, yuck, and we weren't sure which unit number it was, so it's a U. And then again, it's bags, yuck, and unidentified unit. And then you can see in other ones that maybe they either didn't put their card out the week before, but they were rejected the week before. But you see a lot of others that didn't get rejected this third week, so they're cleaning up their act. So the next piece of information that we sent out was text to the waste management route supervisor. So on this print screen, you can see that what we say is Monday green in the streets is Klana, had 5 that were rejected. Fair Oaks, I'm sorry, not 5, number 5 Klana Road was rejected. There's a rejection at 33 Fair Oaks and 65 Fair Oaks. And then there's a rejection at 43 Kernwood and 96 Kernwood. So that's all we would put there and send it. But once they received that with those particular roads or streets, then they knew that we were out of that area too, so that they could go in. But then they were also expecting to see these rejected carts there, just in case somebody came along and took their oops tag off. So just to be aware of that. So here's the rejection list report. That what we would do is basically make a PDF of our online data from our Excel sheet, and we'd send it to the DPW office and to Waste Management every day by 12 noon, so that if people called to complain that their recycling wasn't picked up, they would look at the sheet and that they would see that, 15 Brook Street, yes, you're on the list. You were rejected, and then the clerk can actually say you were rejected for bags, and we're not sure which unit, but you were rejected for bags. So not a lot of people call in. I need to make that point. But if they did, and then if they argue and they say that someone else threw it in, a lot of times we would send the truck back. We would send trucks back. And I say a lot of times, it really was not many times at all. We give them the benefit of the doubt, and then next time keep watching it. But usually it was cleaned up. So maybe somebody did contaminate their cart. Who knows? So anyway, this was the purpose of the public relations, so that people could call in to DPW or to Waste Management and find out if, in fact, their cart accidentally got skipped or that they were on our route and we actually rejected them. And then they're told what they can do to help clean it up. So here's our last week of the program for the Thursday Blue top recycling carts. So we sent this out to like the head of DPW. We sent it out to the associate commissioner. I got it as the recycling coordinator. The route supervisor got it. And so here's our statistics of how we were doing along the way. So so that they would see what's happening too. And it was, again, every day we'd send this out so that everybody knew where we were. And you see a nice drop-off middle through the program, and then you see a huge drop-off the last week of the program, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, here's kind of the things that we did that was different from our little innovations. So we actually wanted to work with the community. We wanted to have conversations at the curbside. So if people ran out and said, "Why are you rejecting my recycling cart?" then we would say, one of the inspectors would stay back and talk to the resident and help them clean up their cart. They wouldn't be cleaning it up themselves, but we'd even hand like gloves to people so that they could clean up their cart and get it picked up, and that way they avoided the oops tag. So we used to report on the curbside interventions that we do too. The next one is, as you see, is the oops card hanging on a railing at a property, and there's a strapping tape that is connected to it. So what we did was, if there was only one thing in the cart, but it was clear that this resident still was not getting, like Poland Spring bags or wrappers were another one that we would hang on a railing like this, because somehow people weren't getting it. So we would put these, and we started calling them love notes. So and people would call us about those too, like, why was this on my doorknob? But basically that was helpful too. The next thing is, here's just some pictures of the team. We had a lot of fun. And then here's the thing that we added at the end of the program, and this year we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it halfway through the program, is those carts that are continuously rejected and keep being put out contaminated, we're going to send letters to the property owners. Regardless whether it's a single family and the property owner lives there, or more than likely it's the property owner is an absentee landlord or a landlord, has a multifamily, and doesn't know what's happening with their residents, just as another way of getting the message to those tenants. So we sent out 294 letters to the property owners in about week 6. And as you can see here, it says 118 letters were sent out 3 weeks before the Recycling IQ program ended. By the last week, only 18 of the carts at those properties were rejected. That's an 85% decline in rejected carts. So we had a huge drop-off. And the other thing that we included in that letter was a rider, a lease rider that I copied from New York City, which landlords can give to their tenants and have them sign it. So it's just another conversation that recycling is mandatory in the city and what is recyclable and what stays out. So we gave them that as a tool. Here's just the bottom of the lease rider that shows that the occupant would sign, et cetera. And then here's our preliminary results of the property owner letter. So 118 went out, 18 only were contaminated the last week of the program, and the decrease in contamination of those particular carts were 85%. So overall results for the Recycling IQ program, rejection rate first week of program was 31.6%. The rejection rate the last week of the program, we got it just under 10%, 9.8%. So the percentage decrease in rejections went down by almost 72%. So here's our nice charts. As a former economics major, I love to see those nice clean charts making a projection downward. And here's the other week. And then here's our donut charts, which you'll see in the Recycling IQ materials as well. So basically, this was our cleanest day. Lynn Green Monday, mostly single families. 65% of those carts were never rejected. 25% got a single tag, and then so on. As opposed to our dirtiest day, which is Lynn Blue Wednesday, and only 42% never got a tag. 34% got a single tag, and then 11% got second tags, and so on. So the next is what we did right after the program is we checked adjacent areas. So those were streets that were next to the streets that we were working. And the one that's coded in yellow here is the street that was worked during the Recycling IQ as comparison. So you can see that our contamination rates are still very high in the areas adjacent to where we worked. But then, this one street here, Parker, is still very low, 7.69%. The next slide is Lynn tonnage. So what did happen during the Recycling IQ is that you can see that our trash went up. So that was a little disheartening. And then the recycling went down. And I think one of the reasons why is because we shouldn't be really measuring so much by tonnage, because I think when people learned the rules, a lot of liquids were coming out of the recycling and a lot of the contamination, making it lighter. But I mean, that's still something to be checked out. So what worked? Contamination in the targeted areas decreased by 72%. We did, for the first time, a comprehensive citywide recycling education and outreach. And the property owner letters seem to work very well, too, and we're going to do that again this year. What needs improvement? We didn't have very good communication with the hauler during the program, so we never got the waste audits that were promised. However, we already have received our waste audits this time around, or at least a preliminary one. And then holding trucks back while the carts were inspected. There wasn't a lot of communication with the trucks in the beginning, and that got corrected about halfway through. So sometimes we'd get to an area and the carts would be already emptied. So did recycling improve in Lynn? Yes. Did recycling volume go up while weight went down? That's something that we need to figure out how to measure. Do we enforce no recyclables in the trash is the question, and do we communicate with property owners, and how do we get Lynners overall to recycle more? So apart from running the Recycling IQ program again, another thing that we are going to do, and we've just been approved of it, is that we're going to bring on a dedicated waste enforcement coordinator. And in addition to, through our inspectional services division, that they're the people, the inspectors who write fines for trash and recycling non-compliance. And so this time, in addition, we're going to have someone working directly just on recycling and trash part-time year-round, and we hope that that will help better keep the compliance up. So that's my presentation, and I guess I can be muted again.
Yes, you can. Julia, that was sensational, and what an amazing amount of work you've done. So congratulations and thank you. And you too have many questions coming in. So Marissa, I've just handed it to you, and we are all on bated breath here. Let me, just in case I have you muted. Okay, Marissa. Oh no, Marissa, it's you. So Marissa, you can probably still hear me. Do you have a different phone you could use to call in on, or try the computer interface? So I'm hopeful Marissa heard that. And what I'm going to do in the meantime is start asking some of the questions. And Marissa, I'll keep an eye on the chat box so you can keep me updated on that. So thanks, everybody. So while we've had some great questions, not everybody has asked questions, so I'd love to hear some more come in, or see some more come in. So Janice and Julia, a couple of similar questions came in, so I'll ask both of you about this. People were very impressed by the staff that you had out there in the field doing the reviewing and the testing. So people want to know, how much time are they spending inspecting bins, either on a weekly or monthly basis? So Julia or Janice, are you able to respond to that?
I can tell you that so basically we hire summer workers to work on this program. And I was lucky enough to have hired this whole crew the year before to do social marketing. So they had already had experience out educating people, but this was a whole different program, but they all came back. So I felt like I had a nice trained group. And so the hours were very set from 7 to 11 a.m., 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So those are the hours that they worked. Sometimes they get finished a little earlier, but in the beginning of the program, you're working until 11 a.m. or even beyond some days. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Great. So, Julia, we're going to give Marissa another try here. Right. We all want this to work. And Marissa, do you want to give it a try?
Hello?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Yay.
And you're not reverberating. Yay. Okay, so Julia, we'll come back to you with more questions. But Marissa, thank you so much. And we're definitely looking forward to your presentation.
All right. Just make sure we're working. All right, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Marissa Perez-Dormitzer, and I work for the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District. The Refuse District serves both New Bedford and Dartmouth with a combined population of approximately 130,000. We work very closely with city staff and town staff. We have a great team, and we're able to accomplish a lot with our awesome team. So where are we located? The two communities are next to each other. I believe Janice had a similar map. So there we are on the southeastern coast of Mass between Providence and Cape Cod. And the district has two main functions. We own and operate the Crapo Hill landfill. It was opened in 1995, and it's expected to last another 10 to 14 years. It's also the last brand new landfill that was constructed in the state. And then the second thing that we do is more of my focus. It's public outreach, program planning, and grant management. The district has many priorities. I'll mention a few of them. We want to extend the life of the landfill, of course, because we do have a landfill. We're very fortunate that the landfill is close by, so the communities have low transportation costs compared to other communities. And then the cost for disposal at Crapo Hill is less compared to other local disposal options. And then a second priority is, of course, that we're working on improving the quality of the recyclables. Just like Janice mentioned, our most common contaminants are plastic bags, case wrap, and bagged recyclables. So I wanted to throw some slides up here to get an idea of what we saw in some extreme cases of contamination. So these are recycling carts, I'll remind you. That's just trash. You can see there on the right. We did see a fair amount of toilet seats, and obviously that one is clearly not recyclables. So in order to reduce contamination, the two communities chose to apply for the IQ Kit grant through DEP in both 2017 and 2018. DEP awarded up to $15,000 for each community in 2017 and up to $40,000 in 2018. So now diving into the steps that we took to implement the IQ Kit, some of them have been mentioned previously. Our first step was to hold a kickoff meeting with the various partners. We met with DEP, the Recycling Partnership, the city and the town, as well as the MRF, and the hauler. In New Bedford, ABC is the contracted hauler for collection, and in Dartmouth, the town does the collection with town trucks and town employees. So then going on to the second step, I know we've seen these before. These are the tags. So on the far left is the thank you tag that we did use to let residents know they were doing a good job. Then in the middle is our oops tag, where we would check off the items that were wrong, that don't belong. And then on the right, that shows the back of the two tags. And so we found that to be helpful. With the oops tag, we were telling people what doesn't belong, but then with the back, we were telling people what does belong, like what's okay to go in the recycling. And then you've seen these before again. So we sent out the general information postcard before cart checking began. And then we sent out the plastic bag postcard about 2 weeks into the program. In New Bedford, both postcards were in English and Spanish. And in Dartmouth, the postcards were in English and Portuguese. And that applies to the cart tags as well, the two different languages. And I'll just add that when we had extra of the plastic bag postcards, we turned them into cart tags. So that gave us another option when we were out in the neighborhoods doing the tagging. And then third, we made a plan for cart checking. And so as Janice mentioned, we checked carts for 8 weeks. The idea was to pick the areas that were most in need of education. We selected them based on a few different criteria. We consulted with ABC Disposal in New Bedford. We also spoke with the town drivers. We also had conversations with the two communities' waste reduction enforcement coordinators. That's a grant-funded position through DEP where the person is out in the neighborhoods looking in recycling and trash carts, so they had a good feel for where these areas might be. And then finally, we went out and checked the areas. We wanted to be really sure since a lot of resources were going to this effort. So we did a lot of just checks, making sure that these were certainly the areas with problematic carts. So now going through this chart, you can see New Bedford on the left and Dartmouth on the right. We started checking carts in New Bedford in June and July. And then in Dartmouth, we checked them August through November. Some of the cart checkers check carts in both communities, so we couldn't do the two communities at the same time. In New Bedford, we check carts on Tuesdays and Fridays, whereas in Dartmouth, we check them 3 days a week, and it was every other week. With Dartmouth Collection Program, they collect on an alternating schedule. 1 week, paper and cardboard is picked up, and then the next week, bottles and cans are picked up. And in our planning phase, we found that the paper and cardboard carts were pretty clean, and so we chose to focus on the bottle and can carts. So that's the every other week. And then moving on, in New Bedford, we reached approximately 1,100 to 1,200 households. And in Dartmouth, we reached around 700. And then looking at the housing density, in New Bedford, the average building that we went to was around a 3-family, whereas in Dartmouth, you can see the average is closer to a single family. In New Bedford, we had 6 cart checkers plus a spare. In Dartmouth, we had fewer. We had 4 cart checkers. And then finally, I'll mention that in New Bedford, egregious recycling carts, like I showed you in the pictures, those were arranged to be left as trash. We didn't want them to end up in the MRF, so we worked with ABC Disposal to have them picked up as trash. And then the city did their typical enforcement with warnings and fines during weeks 3 and 7. In contrast, in Dartmouth, egregious recycling carts were left behind for the resident to fix. So then finally, we had to identify who was going to be doing the cart checking and have trainings. And so this is a picture of our training on the right there. Kathy Mirza from DEP took the picture. She took part in our training. So on the far right of the picture, you can see Meg Hebert. She is our recycling assistant. She was one of the cart checkers from the district, and then there was me from the district and Tom Cabral, who's our recycling intern. So we have 3 district employees, and then to the left of Meg is Tony Silva, who oversees the enforcement staff in the city. He was actually our spare, but then the other cart checkers were the enforcement staff from the city. And then this picture on the left shows the cart checkers in Dartmouth. Again, Kathy Mirza was there as part of our training. And so we have Meg on the right, and then moving to the left, we have Tom, and then there's me, and then all the way on the left is Scott Ciardi, who is Dartmouth's Waste Reduction Enforcement Coordinator. And I did mention that some of us check carts in both communities. That was the refuse district staff, so we check carts from January through November. And I just threw up some of the odd things that we saw that I'm sure many of you have seen in recycling carts, including fake mustaches, hair, dryer lint, bags of dog poop, surprising amount of toilet seats, diapers, toothpaste tubes, nail polish, and Meg saw a gallon jug of ant killer full of ant killer. So then moving on, when we were out on the street, we kept track of the data like they did in Lynn on pen and paper. So we had sheets of paper with the addresses, and we would note down the information by hand. And so this shows you what we were noting down. You can see we start with the address, the number of units, and then we would note down whether or not the recycling cart was out. And then we noted the score. So locally, we score recycling carts with a 1 being, like the pictures I showed you before, egregious problems. And then a 3 would be a perfect or a near perfect set out, and 2 in between. And this is something we do locally that was not part of the IQ kit. And then we would note the tags that were left. So we had the option of the oops tag, the thank you tag, but also that plastic bag tag that was the postcard that we turned into a tag. And then finally, we would note if the recycling was left as trash in New Bedford, or in Dartmouth, we would note if it was left behind. And just to reiterate that scoring, I'm going to mention it again when I talk about the results. So a score of 3 was perfect or almost perfect. A score of 2 means there's some effort made, but confusion about what's okay and what's not okay. You can see a pair of boots in there and looks like some kind of plastic bag or wrap. And then a score of 1 would mean there's no effort, that the trash and the recyclables are commingled. It could be that they're using the recycling cart as a trash cart. And so that wraps up the cart checking. And so in addition to the cart checking, we also were provided with funds to do an outreach campaign. And in both communities, we did a variety of things, including newspaper and radio. And so I just have a few examples here. We were able to put a sign in the window at our local market basket. We put signs on the outside of buses, as well as the inside. In the inside, they were in English and Spanish. And then we also created vehicle magnets that were placed on city and district vehicles, particularly the ones who were doing the cart checking. And we did our best with social media. Julie has done a fantastic job. I don't think we've ever had a post with 15,000 people reach. It's a little difficult because it takes a lot of time, but kudos to Julia for doing such a great job with social media. And then in Dartmouth, again, just pointing out a few things, We made A-frame signs that were displayed at local supermarkets and town buildings. We also made a retractable banner, and this one was at Town Hall. We moved it around to different city buildings. So now I wanted to share the results. I have 3 different graphs to show you. So we're first starting with the average recycling cart scores. So if you remember, a 1 would mean it's an egregious problem, like the pictures I showed you, and a 3 would be perfect or near perfect. So our goal is to move up more towards the 3. So we want our number to get higher. So if we look at the top line, that's Dartmouth, they started with an average score in week 1 at 2.48, and they ended with an average score of 2.67, and their score increased by 8%. And last week, we actually went and did a follow-up week where we went back to all the addresses in Dartmouth to see how they were doing, and the average score was 2.62, so pretty good. It showed me that they're maintaining their good practices. And then in New Bedford, if we look at that orange line, they started week 1 with an average score of around 2.0, and then ended with an average score at week 8 at 2.49. So their score improved by 24%, comparing week 1 and week 8. And then during their follow-up week, which we did in October, their average score was 2.29. It is lower than our high score in week 8, but it was higher than where we started. So we did feel like there was some improvement based on looking at the average score. So then next, we're looking at the number of tags that were left behind. Again, Dartmouth is the green line. So in Dartmouth, we started with 216 tags, and then we ended at 113. And so their tagging went down by 48% comparing week 1 and week 8. And during our follow-up last week, we left tags at 122 addresses, or we left 122 tags. So similar, showing they kept up those great recycling practices. Looking at New Bedford's line, you can see it's a little bit more erratic. We started in New Bedford with 164 tags. We went up a little, and then we ended at 130. And so their tagging decreased by 21% from week 1 to week 8. But then when we did our follow-up week in October, we left 173 tags. So that was a fair amount, and clearly that showed some backsliding. And then looking down at the tagging rate, just to see it in a little bit different way, so this is the percentage of addresses that received a tag. So in Dartmouth, during the first week, 33% were tagged, and then in week 8, 18% were tagged. In New Bedford, week 1, more, so 40% were tagged, and then by week 8, 31% were tagged. And so my last graph, it shows the set-out rates. We wanted to get an idea if this project was affecting the set-outs. So looking first at the top line, which is New Bedford, you can see their set-out rate is pretty steady. It's always in the 70-something%, and the same for the follow-up week. Dartmouth, however, their line showed somewhat of a decline over time. We really don't know what this can be attributed to. As you recall, we started checking the carts in Dartmouth in August, and we ended in November. So it may just be simply a matter of the weather getting worse. During our follow-up, as you can see, it was 56% again, and almost reinforces the idea that it's the weather. Last week, it was windy and rainy and cold, and there was frost on the cart. So perhaps it could be due to the weather, but again, we don't know for sure. And I'll just add, in comparing the two communities, Dartmouth and New Bedford are different communities. Dartmouth is more of a middle-class suburban community. New Bedford is a city. It's low. There is a low income. To give you an example, they have a very high percentage of free lunches. It was so high that the city got a grant to enable everyone, all the students in the city, to get free lunch. So they are very different communities, but we are doing some things differently in New Bedford this time that I will share. But just before we go on, though, I wanted to mention in terms of the leaving carts behind, you probably surmise that in New Bedford, they were not interested in leaving carts behind, although this was discouraged by DEP. In Dartmouth, they were already leaving carts behind, so it was nothing new for them, so there was not a problem with that. But as I'm planning for the second round of the IQ kit, I am trying to think of ways to increase New Bedford's results. And so I'll mention a few different things that we're doing. So one, we're going to be hiring temporary workers. We plan to partner one city or district staff with a temp. We're just thinking that if a temp encounters a disagreeable resident, they might not have the tools to handle that resident, and they also perhaps might not show up the next day if they have someone who's yelling at them or not very happy. So then we're also covering more households this time. We'll have 4 teams of cart checkers. Last year we had 3, and then this year we'll be checking carts for 3 hours. Last year, we didn't have a great idea how long it would all take, and we ended up checking carts for about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours each morning. We're also selecting our areas in a more scientific way. Last year, when we picked our areas, I think everyone was in agreement what those areas would be. But this year, we're not doing those areas. We're moving into new areas, so we wanted to figure out the best way to narrow down where we wanted to go. And so I created this Google map, and the blue icons represent 2 things. They represent addresses that have received violations related to recycling at least once, and some perhaps more than that. They also represent addresses that received a score of 1, which was, if you remember, the egregious problems, and they received that score more than once. And so this helped us to kind of focus in on where we wanted to check the carts. Unfortunately, we can't reach the whole city, so we did have to pick certain areas to go to for this second round. Then we're going to be focusing efforts on working with the landlords in many ways. We're going to be mailing a letter to each landlord before we start checking carts, and the letter will explain the project and offer different tools and resources. We'll also be presenting at a landlord association meeting in May to offer the tools and resources. And so the bullets below are some of those tools and resources. So we're making a bilingual flyer that we're going to mail a sample flyer to the landlords with the letter, but then we'll offer to mail or drop off additional flyers. We're creating posters that landlords can display in the hallways of their properties. We're also purchasing several thousand reusable bags that can be distributed to tenants, and the idea is that they would avoid using plastic bags to transport their recyclables to the recycling carts. These are being purchased through separate grant funds, like Julia had mentioned, the RDP funds. And then we're making several thousand decals that will be placed on the front of every recycling cart in the cart checking areas, and the decals will have the no plastic bags message. And then finally, we're going to attempt to call the landlords of the properties receiving a score of 1 each week. Another thing that we want to try to weave in this time is to include the why. I believe last time we did a great job with the how and the what to recycle, but I would like to include a little bit more of the why. Why should we put these bottles and cans and paper in this container and not in the trash container? And why don't plastic bags belong in the recycling cart? I also am hoping to add more personal interactions. We were fortunate to talk to some residents when we were cart checking, but I know that I think Meg would agree that we were hoping that people would just come out of their houses so that way we'd have a chance to have some great conversations with them. So we're trying to set up more opportunities to engage with people. One thing we're doing is that we're in the process of speaking to all the English as a second language and GED classes in New Bedford. So far, Meg and I have done 12 presentations, and we still have more to go. Then we're also going to be holding shows with Jack Golden. Jack Golden does a funny acrobatic show about recycling, and we're going to have that show in the schools in the cart checking areas. And then also as part of our outreach to landlords, we're going to offer to meet with or call the tenants. We've done this before where we go to the property and we open the lids of the recycling trash carts and then we just go over what's okay, what's not okay. It's a great way to reach out to people. Then this time we'll be using an app to track data. Last time, again, it was pen and paper, but with more addresses, I'm concerned that it will take a long time to enter the data into Excel. So we're working with Rubicon, who developed an app that was used in Atlanta, and we'll use that app locally in both communities to track the data. We'll also be doing 2 live stream videos, which are really fun, on New Bedford Guide's Facebook page. New Bedford Guide is a local media outlet with a very active Facebook page. They have around 100,000 likes, and so it's a great opportunity to do some live stream videos with them. And then finally, we'll be revamping our websites. So right now there's recycling information on the city's website, the town's website, and the district's website. And so we'll create a new website to house all the recycling information and serve as the district's website. So that's it. I did want to wrap up by offering help. I have found that over the years, so many other communities have helped us to implement our programs. So we're more than glad to answer any questions, have a phone call, just share any information we can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marissa. That too was overwhelming and very impressive. So we have lots and lots of questions. So Julia, I'm going to unmute you, and Janice, I think you're self-muted, I think. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself as well. So one of the questions that we had for both Julia and Marissa related to the fines that you either can or do issue for non-compliance. So Julia, might you first comment on what happens in your community?
Yeah, so and that gets back to why we're going to get a waste, hire an additional waste enforcement person part-time. So in Lynn, either trash and recycling violations, we give a $50 first fine, a $100 second fine, and each additional fine is $300 each. However, really, the inspectors are really only finding the most egregious in the community. So they're not opening lids of shut recycling carts to see what's in there. And they have other duties too, so I'm not even sure that expectation would be worthwhile. However, I just want to get into the Recycling IQ. With the Recycling IQ, we do not do any fines in those areas. I mean, maybe for overflowing trash, if an inspector had seen that. But basically, there are no fines while we are implementing the Recycling IQ. The fine or the feedback or the way to get the behavior change is to reject the cart at the curb, leaving it to be cleaned up. And I think that is really a powerful way of getting action. I think even more so than fining, because fines go to property owners, and so the residents of a multifamily are not even getting the fine, and so it's just one step away from in communicating with the resident. And that way, I think the Recycling IQ is by far more productive.
Great, thank you. And Marissa, how about you?
Sure. I mean, I can just share the city does have enforcement staff. So currently they have 3 enforcement staff, and their job is trash and recycling. So they don't work for the health department or have other responsibilities. Their focus is on trash carts with raised lids, or recycling in the trash, or bulky items set out too early or without an appointment. And the city has a system where they first have a warning, and then the first fine is $25, and it goes up from there. I believe the maximum fine is $300. But as I mentioned, the city didn't want to leave carts behind, so instead they used the enforcement as part of the IQ kit.
Great, thank you. So there are a variety of questions about the cost of things. So I'm going to ask all 3 of you to respond. I'm going to ask Janice to go first, and then we'll go Julia and Marissa. So I'm going to tell you all the how much it costs questions. And you can go as you want. So the initial question was, how much did this cost? And so Janice, you have a different perspective than the individual communities will, of course, because you have a state grant program. But then we have questions about, have you, in any of the communities, tried to change the the stickers or the messages or the signage that comes in the toolkit. So have you tried to do that? If you have done that, did it cost much money? How much did the magnetic signs cost? How much did printing the posters cost? And then we also have questions from Marissa about the app that she referred to. So you can answer any or all of those, but Janice, if you could go first, please.
Well, I don't have a good handle on how much every community used, but they got up to 15,000 and they all found a way to spend most of that 15,000. So we worked with 6 communities last year. Only one of them had 7,500 because it was a drop off, and they all used pretty much their entire budget, except for I think it was Dartmouth, because they're the refuse district. They were able to use some of the same stuff that New Bedford had. And this year we've already given out or awarded $287,500 to 9 communities that have so far completed their applications and will be implementing. And there are 2 more in the pipeline. So the state is making a lot of money available to implement this program, because we think it's one way we can help the national sort issue. In terms of how much those banners and things cost, I do have a sheet that might be helpful. I don't think it has all of the costs for every type of outreach material that they used, but Tiger Press was our state vendor that we asked the communities who were implementing the program to use, because he had all the artwork. It was all templated. He could change things, easily, like the putting in the town seal or their phone number or whatever, changing some of the words. And so he created a price sheet for me to give out to communities. It sort of talks about how much it costs to do this many OOPS tags, and the setup fee is included in that. But I will say that we were really interested in a uniform message. So Marissa can tell you I'm not amenable to them changing the artwork much at all, because we worked with Recycling Partnership. We have data to, there's reasons why we're using the icons and we're using the specific materials that we're using, because we asked the MRFs, what is it that you don't want to see? So those are the things, everything that's on those outreach materials is highly researched, and we want a uniform message across the state. So we're really not that, they're customizable to an extent. Let me just put it that way.
Thanks, Janice.
So
Julia, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I can just give an idea of what different things cost us, unit costs. Like, again, I rave about the banners because I think they're so great. And they only, for sewn edges too, it's only $100 a banner. So that's pretty inexpensive. We mailed to 40,000 households the info card, and that was through Every Door Delivery, EDDM. And that was our biggest cost by far. And so I'm just looking at, with the postage and everything, it was about $9,000, $10,000. And then the billboards were about $1,500 each billboard. So those are some of those costs. And then Facebook is really cheap. Facebook costs about $50 a month, $50 to $100 depending. So.
Thank you. And Marissa?
I think I'm muted.
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Sorry?
Oh, okay. It looks like I'm muted. Okay, great. So, well, the total cost was, the total cost of the funds received from DEP. I don't think I'll respond to changing the artwork. I think Janice answered that. The magnetic signs cost around $20 each, $22 for the vehicle signs that we made. And the posters that we will be making this time looks like they are 79 cents each. So that's for 11 by 17 full color posters on cardstock. And then the app has been quoted, the total cost will be around $400. And I'd be glad to talk to anyone about the details, but it's relatively inexpensive. They give me a price. It was per address that we go to, and so it ends up being around $400 for the app. And they're going to throw in a phone too, I'll add.
Oh, can I just add too? I think that every community should check out, what the best way of advertising for them is, because I had checked out advertising on buses, which we have the MBTA, and we're close to Boston, and those prices were the same price to do a little like bus depot sign as to do a Clear Channel billboard in Lynn. So Marissa gets really good prices for her local transportation bus lines, because I was at awe that, she had those, but they get a much, much, much better price than we could get in Lynn from the MBTA.
And just one more thing, I'm more than glad to share our budget with the items and how much they cost if anyone's interested. It looks like my email is up there right now. So if anyone is interested, I'd be glad to send you the information for last year and this year.
Great. Thanks, Marissa.
I don't know if it's helpful, Lynn, but I have we have a Box.com account that we have the Recycling IQ kit on and everything. And one of the things that one of the files now that we have, file folders, is a welcome kit that I'm sending out to communities that are going to be implementing it now. And I actually have put in sample budgets. They came from Marissa and Julia, and sample standard operating procedures and things like that. I tried to take out the names of people, but so I can send that link too. I think if people find that interesting or want to see that kind of detail of a sample, I'm happy to send out the link to that folder.
Janice, that would be great. Gives me the opportunity to tell folks that sometime in the next couple of days, you'll all get an email that will give the links to the recording as well as to the individual PowerPoint presentations. And certainly I could include that link in that communication with everybody. So that would be great. Thank you, Janice. So there's also some questions about, well, what do you do? This is obviously focused on recycling compliance. Have there been efforts on the mirror? So looking at the non-compliance in trash. Janice, do you want to reply to that first?
Can you repeat the question? I wasn't
sure. Yeah, and that wasn't really articulate either. So this program focuses on what you have put in your recycling container.
Yes,
that's where the education's focused. Has there been a similar effort for looking at the garbage pails that for lack of recycling, that the recycling is showing up in the garbage?
Yes. So I'll let Marissa talk about that because she got a grant, or Dartmouth got a grant from DEP, the REC grant. And that grant is specifically for looking at recyclables in the trash and enforcing mandatory recycling ordinances. As far as the Recycling IQ kit, we try to be very narrowly focused because one of the things that we have, or at least the Recycling Partnership has found, and I think in marketing in general, you really want to have like a singular message, and you don't want to overdo or with too much information, or you might dilute that message. So when we're talking about implementing the IQ kit, we're really only talking about focus on the recycling cart. Try to leave that trash cart alone because you don't want to overwhelm people, and just have your one message that you're drawing people in. Don't put the bags in there. They'll look at that, and if they want to know more information, we give more information in the annual mailer or on the web page. So we're stepping up the amount of information that they're getting based on where they go to look. So, but Marissa is the perfect person to answer the other question about trash.
Okay, thank you, Janice. So I can mention two things. So the town is currently in the middle of the REC, or the Waste Reduction Enforcement Coordinator grant, And when they first received the grant, we talked about making a new tag or something new that we could leave behind to let people know that recyclables don't belong in the trash. Dartmouth is a pay-as-you-throw community with orange bags, and we're amazed by the amount of recyclables that are in the trash, which we notice because we're out there. But over time, as the markets have evolved, we have instead decided to focus on the quality of the recyclables. And so we're no longer thinking about a tag or something to leave behind on the trash. And that's the same thing with the IQ kit. At a meeting last year, we had been talking about making a new tag as part of the IQ kit that would be the same thing. It would be leaving people information to let them know that recyclables don't belong in the trash. But over time, we've decided that it's the most important thing right now is to focus on the quality of the recyclables, considering how the markets are. And so even though the district has their own landfill, and obviously it's in our interest to not fill up the landfill with recyclables, it's even more important at this moment to focus on the quality of the recyclables, because we want to keep recycling going and make it sustainable. We're constantly lately reminding people when we're doing our presentations that recyclables are made into things, that they're the feedstock of a business that's now manufactured into a new product, so people can understand the whole process.
And the stickers and things that Marissa's talking about, they were created, is what I'm trying to say. They were created and they are part of the Recycling IQ Kit artwork. And it'll just say, it might say like rec sticker, WREC, if you're ever looking at that artwork. And I think it just says more like these go in the trash. On the left, there's like a column that'll say these go in the trash, and then these go in the recycling. And then it will show all the things that should go in the recycling. And that sticker would be meant for the trash cart, not the recycling cart. But as Marissa's saying, that's not really the focus.
Thank you. Have any of you had any complaints about invasion of privacy when you look in people's carts?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Marissa.
Oh, well.
Yes, I mean, I'll say not many, but we have had people who have stopped setting out their recycling carts since we were there. Like, we would go to a cart and it was a leave behind, and they never set out the recycling cart again for the remainder of the program. It was just a handful. I think Meg and I could probably pick out 3 addresses or something like that. It's just a handful. But there were people who had concerns, people who called the town and were concerned about it. Mm-hmm.
We have people complaining on Facebook, that this is an invasion of privacy. But then we just answer back that when the cart is on the curb, it is no longer, a private matter. And so, and the city has the right to inspect those carts. So,
having said that, they're not searching through all those carts, from top to bottom. So someone could easily hide their magazine or whatever, like below. If they're not. We're not looking to find out people's private lives, so we're not delving too deeply.
So hopefully they're not on this webinar. Okay.
Yeah. On that note, what we, how do we decide whether a cart's rejectable or not is that we open the cart. If we can see 3 things that are wrong, that's when we'll reject the cart. 3 things or more. So we always even say one, even if you pick them out and then look again, is there anything? And that's where we came up with the love note, or leaving a little note on a doorknob at the property if there was still, if every week they had 1 or 2 things that were wrong. But basically, that's how we decided to reject.
Great. So that brings us to another question that Marissa had. Marissa, you noted that your program includes a score. And so the question was, how are people reacting to that? Do they actually understand what it means? And is it do you find it to be an incentive?
So we only use the score to guide our efforts. We don't discuss the score, not that it's private. Nothing we do is private, obviously. We work for government, but we don't tell people about their score. We don't make the scores public. So they're more for our internal purposes to help guide our outreach efforts.
Thanks. And perhaps one final question that also relates to education, and I would appreciate hearing from all of you. So you are communicating with your citizenry that this is an oops. This shouldn't have been in the recycling container. Do you get people asking you questions about why not? Is there ongoing educational opportunities available to interested citizens, or is this really that shouldn't have been there and that's the end of the conversation?
I can start answering that. I think that the people that are going out and doing this are doing a phenomenal job of trying to find people and give the direct feedback at the curb. If they see someone come at them, they're from everything I've heard from the 10 communities so far, they actually really want to talk to the resident and not reject. They tell them what can go in and go out and try to briefly say why. They sometimes get pulled into long conversations that aren't helpful for them to finish the route. But in Newburyport, when I got the report back from them, their final report when they did it last year, one thing the recycling coordinator was saying was, the fact that these are rejected or not rejected doesn't show the level of improvement that I saw and the quality of the conversations that I had on the curb. I was able to really get through to people. Some people really hated me when they first saw me, but then they finally understood this is a worker safety issue, that this is like an economic issue. And by the time, at the end of it, they were my advocates and they would tell their neighbors what to put in. So I think that the feedback at the curb is the biggest benefit of this program. Like we really want them to reach out and speak to people and have those conversations. But Julia and Marissa, you guys can expound.
So
yeah, I would say. Okay, go ahead,
Julia. No, go ahead, Julia.
No, that's all right.
Okay, all right. So I'll just add also. I ditto what Janice said. I'll mention that we also another thing we did and struggled with is writing notes. So I think Meg and I tend to be note writers. And last week when we were out checking carts in Dartmouth, I did write, don't put these plastic bags in because they jam the equipment at the recycling facility. It's almost hard to avoid doing that because there's just this urge. You want to let people know what the problem is, why it's a problem. And I'll just mention that we're trying to add more outreach. Like I mentioned in my presentation, we're hoping to do more work with the landlords and try to have these meetings with the tenants to try to enhance that outreach and education. So we do believe it's helpful to have these interactions with people, and we want to add more opportunities for that.
Yeah.
Great. And Julia, do you want
to? Yeah, I was going to say that, we want to. So I think the question was like, what do we want to communicate? We want to communicate that you can't put this in your cart, but we also want them to know why they can't put it in the cart. So that's where all the other communication happens, like our discussion on Lynn community television about Poland Spring bags or water bottle wrapping, and so that people understand the why behind what we're doing as well. So we try to do a lot of that communication, but we also want them to know that it can't go in there.
Wonderful. Well, we're just about out of time, and I'd like to really thank all three of our speakers. Outstanding and impressive. And I'd also love to thank our audience and all your great questions. Obviously, not all of you got your questions answered. We'll try to follow up with you, those that didn't get your substantive questions reply to you, so don't give up hope. And as I said, you'll receive a follow-up email giving you the links for the recording and the presentations, and I'll also send you Janice's link to her folder that has some of the actual details. So with that, I'll say thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon, and appreciate your joining us and being on the webinar. Bye-bye.